Hi there. Welcome back to Huddle Psychology. You know, and you have seen, maybe have come across that particular person in your family or your friend circle or a colleague in your office. That person who always kind of defends the toxic family member, the toxic boss, or the toxic friend. The friend who makes excuses for someone's awful behavior. The coworker who covers up for the boss everyone hates. They're often called flying monkeys. No, I'm not trying to crack a poor joke. I'm not talking about the whiskey, that's monkey shoulder. We are talking about flying monkeys. And if you ever wondered why smart, good hearted people become kind of enablers for terrible behavior, then this video is going to give you a lot of insight. Because here in this session, what you're about to learn isn't only about other people. Most of us have been flying monkeys at some point. And understanding why we end up doing that, we exhibit that behavior, will actually change how you see family dynamics, friendships, and even yourself. Welcome back to Huddle Psychology, and I'm Rahul Nair. So let's set this up. Firstly, let's talk about what the definition is of a flying monkey. First and foremost, we need to understand that the term comes from the very famous Wizard of Oz story, where you come across the winged creatures who did the terrible wicked witch's biddings. If you know what I am talking about, if you've read Wizard of Oz or watched Wizard of Oz, you'll understand what I'm talking about. In psychology, flying monkeys are basically people who enable, defend, or kind of carry out the agenda of someone who is being harmful or someone who is trying to be manipulative. They are the family member who says, that's just how they are. That's just how they are when it comes to your abusive relative, right? They are the friends who guilt you into forgiving someone who hurt you. They are the people who become messengers for toxic individuals, delivering their manipulation by proxy, essentially. And here's what's important to understand: flying monkeys aren't usually bad people. They're not. They're not evil masterminds plotting against you to bring you down. Most of the time, they genuinely believe that they're actually helping you. They're helping you. They're trying to keep the peace or doing the right thing. This might sound paradoxical, but that's what they believe. The psychology behind good people becoming enablers um, is way, way more complex. It's way more complex and tragic than you might think. So let's dive into it a little bit more. The first reason people become flying monkeys is pure survival instinct. So, in many families or social groups, there's one person who holds all the power, right? Um, whether it is emotional, financial, or social, whatever it may be, there's usually one person who kind of wields the power. Everyone else in the group learns to keep that person happy, because the consequences of upsetting that person are going to be quite damaging or quite severe. So think about it. Let me give you an example. If your mom, if your mom has explosive anger and takes it out on the entire family when she's upset, then you learn to keep your mom happy no matter what, at all costs, right? Because you know the fallout is going to be pretty harsh and pretty bad. If your friend group revolves around one very dramatic person who cuts off people for disagreeing with them, then you learn to stay on their good side, right? So when someone challenges the toxic person, so when there is someone who is going to challenge your mom or that influential friend in your group, what is happening? So when someone challenges the toxic person, the flying monkeys panic. Why? Why do they panic? It's because their nervous system kind of goes into threat mode, right? Because they know what happens when this toxic person gets triggered, angered, or whatever, right? They're not defending the bad behavior per se because they think it's right. They are defending it because they are so scared about the fallout that might actually happen. They're not defending the toxic person per se, they're not defending the toxic behavior. They are worried and scared about what is going to happen when this person is triggered. So, what they will try and do is whoever is going to call out the toxic person, the flying monkey comes in and says, hold on a minute, look, there's nothing wrong with this person, you're trying to rock the boat. Because the flying monkey is essentially wired to think that something bad might happen if the toxic person is triggered. From their perspective, right? So, from their perspective, you are the one causing the problems by rocking the boat, not the toxic person. They've spent, now think about it, they have spent years learning to manage the toxic person's emotions, and all of a sudden you come in and you're threatening that fragile peace. They've worked so hard to create and maintain. That's what's happening from their perspective. To them, you are not the victim, you are the threat to their safety. That's what is happening from their perspective. Let's dig a little deeper. The second reason is something that I've talked about in previous videos, is again bonding, trauma bonding. And in this case, what we are talking about is when people go through difficult experiences together, especially in families, they often develop this us against the world kind of mentality. Flying monkeys have usually been hurt by the same person they are trying to defend. It's important to keep that in mind. But instead of recognizing the abuse, they have kind of reframed it as we survived this together. So instead of recognizing the abuse, they've kind of reframed it and they tell themselves that, look, we have been surviving this together, or something like this that goes that family sticks together no matter what. We've survived all of this together. All of these are kind of reframing points of view that they kind of start internalizing. So when you point out, that, for example, dad was emotionally abusive, the flying monkey hears something completely different. The flying monkey hears that dad was a monster and you're stupid for loving him. That's what the flying monkey hears when you try to bring up the point that dad was emotionally abusive. You see where that defense is coming from. When you say mom was neglectful, what the flying monkey hears is your whole childhood was a lie, and you're wrong for having good memories. That's what the flying monkey will hear when that is not what you're trying to say. So they defend the toxic person because admitting the abuse means acknowledging that their whole understanding of their life, as they understood it, their family, their identity, all of this might be wrong. That's a problem for them, obviously, right? So they defend the toxic person because admitting the abuse means acknowledging the fact that their entire life might be wrong. That's obviously terrifying. It would be terrifying for anyone. It's easier to make you the problem than to face the possibility that they've been living in denial. It's very crucial to understand this dynamic. It's easier for them to make you the problem than to face the possibility that they have been living in denial. And there's often genuine love there, which makes it even more complicated, to be honest, right? So they can't reconcile loving someone with that person being harmful. They can't, it doesn't, they can't bring that two things together. So they choose to deny the harm rather than question the love. Simple. So this is another dynamic that plays out with the flying monkey. The third factor is that dysfunctional systems assign people roles, right? And flying monkeys are usually playing the peacekeeper or the fixer role within such systems. These are often people who learned early in life that their job was to kind of always manage other people's emotions, prevent conflict, hold the family together, etc., etc. They've been trained to see that any disruption to the system is a personal failure. They have been brought up like that. They've been trained to see that the world that way. They've trained their thoughts that way. Rocking the boat and creating disharmony is a personal failure. So, when someone speaks up against abuse or sets boundaries, the flying monkey doesn't see someone protecting themselves. They see someone threatening the system they've devoted their life to maintaining and protecting. That's how they see it. Their entire sense of worth is tied to keeping everyone together and keeping the peace, no matter what the consequences of toxic behaviors might be. Right? Their only goal is to somehow keep the peace and not to rock the boat. They also often suffer from what we call learned helplessness. You can Google it. Martin Seligman, the very famous psychologist, has written a lot about this. It is something that is really worth reading and exploring. I won't go into that in detail here, but I'll mention it. So flying monkeys also suffer from learned helplessness. They have basically they've tried to change the toxic person before, again and again and again, they have tried it, but they have failed. And so they've given up on the idea that things can actually get better. They've given up on that idea. In their mind, managing and accepting the dysfunction is the only option left. I mean, there's no way to change the toxic person's behavior, mindset, actions, nothing. They've tried, they've failed miserably. So just kind of managing it and accepting it, no matter what the dysfunction is, that is the only way. They've come to terms with that. So when you suggest that the toxic person needs to change or face some sort of consequences for their behavior, the flying monkey thinks that you're being unrealistic, you're being naive. They've convinced themselves that accommodation is the only way forward. Accommodation is the only way to survive. So if you are going to come and say, this is not done, this is not right, I'm not going to stand for this, I'm not going to listen to this, I'm not going to take this kind of behavior, blah, 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 blah. The flying monkey comes flying in and says, my dear friend, you're being naive, you're being foolish, accepting it and being accommodative is the only way you're going to survive in this system. So that's kind of learned helplessness. There's also a point about projection happening here. There's a projection element happening here. Flying monkeys often have their own unresolved trauma and guilt about their own role in creating the dysfunctional system in the first place. It is complicated. Maybe they participated in scapegoating you. Maybe they stood by while someone was being hurt. Maybe they've done things they're not proud of to maintain their position in the hierarchy, in the social group, in the family, etc. So when you call out the toxic behavior, you are indirectly calling out their complicity as well. You need to understand this. So the flying monkey is already having a lot of guilt inside for having perpetuated the dysfunctional system in the first place. And when you come around and call out the toxic behavior, the flying monkey is effectively hearing that you are indirectly calling out their complicity in the system as well. So they defend the system because obviously admitting it, admitting it's wrong means admitting that they were wrong too, correct? Which they wouldn't want to do. So it's easier to convince themselves that you are being dramatic, oversensitive, ungrateful, um, than face their own role in perpetuating harm, perpetuating a dysfunctional system. They make you the problem because accepting that there is a real problem, accepting that there is a real problem would need them, would require them to take responsibility for their part in it too. And that's a tough call, which very few people are willing to take. There are also social dynamics that I want to probably speak for a minute. This whole dynamic isn't only about families. It happens in friend groups, workplaces, communities, and even on social media. People become flying monkeys for popular influencers, toxic bosses, charismatic leaders. The psychology is basically and essentially absolutely the same. They are getting something from their relationship with the powerful person: status, protection, identity, belonging, something. They're getting something from their association with that powerful person. And toxic people are really, really good at creating these dynamics. They specifically cultivate, they nurture flying monkeys by giving them special treatment, making them feel chosen, making them feel important, sharing secrets with them, or positioning them as the good one, the chosen one, compared to the scapegoat. The flying monkeys get to feel superior because of all this. They get to feel superior, they get to feel special, while the toxic person gets uh, a loyal defender, basically, who will attack their enemies for them. They kind of become human shield. Flying monkeys become human shields for toxic people who use them. It's basically a very mutually beneficial arrangement between the toxic person and the flying monkey, even though it's ultimately harmful for everyone who's involved in the whole system and in the whole game. So, what does this do? What's the damage that it creates, and why does it matter? Why are we talking about it? So, because these dynamics keep the reason why they matter is because these dynamics, they keep abusive systems in place. Because these systems are, because of such flying monkey behavior, because of such dynamics, it's very difficult, it becomes very challenging to challenge and stand up for against abusive behavior, set boundaries. It becomes challenging to do that. When toxic people have a whole network of defenders, it makes their victims question reality. You start thinking, yeah, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I should just accept this because everyone else does. If you remember the gaslighting video a long time back. changing your sense of reality. Flying monkeys also prevent accountability, right? So the toxic person never has to face consequences because there's always someone making excuses for them, cleaning up their messes, or convincing their victims to give them another chance. That is a very big problem because of this dynamic, and it kind of perpetuates even generational trauma. Just keeps flowing down from one generation to another. Children growing up in these kinds of systems learn that this is how relationships work, that love means accepting harmful behavior, and that setting boundaries makes you the bad guy. You start internalizing that from a very young age, and then this passes down the generations. So, having said all this, how do you deal with flying monkeys in your life? First of all, understand that you probably can't change them. That's not being defeatist. That is not being helpless. You need to understand that their psychological investment in the dysfunctional system is usually too deep for you to uproot them from there. So don't waste energy trying to convince the flying monkey to see the truth. They may not. You can try, but you may fail. You may not be able to make them see the truth because they are so emotionally invested into the whole system that they're wearing different lenses completely. Second, set boundaries with them, just like you would set boundaries with the toxic person. Set boundaries. Don't engage in arguments about the abuser. Don't justify your decisions to them. Don't let them guilt you into maintaining harmful relationships. So create boundaries with them. Third, find your own support system. Surround yourself with people who validate your reality and support your healing, and not people who are pressuring you to accept dysfunction and dysfunctional and toxic behavior and systems. So find your own support network. And finally, and this is going to be tough, but try and have some compassion. Some compassion for flying monkeys while protecting yourself from them. Remember that they are usually trauma survivors themselves, operating from a place of fear and learned helplessness. But their trauma doesn't excuse them. Their trauma doesn't excuse the harm they cause you, the harm they cause to anyone. And you don't have to sacrifice your well-being to accommodate somebody else's dysfunction. Let's be very, very absolutely clear about that. So they are, in many ways, survivors of trauma. They have faced abuse from the person or persons they are defending. But remember, have compassion that they are in a helpless situation. But that does not give them the license to play around and ruin your life. You can set boundaries. You can find your own support network and Don't waste your valuable time trying to change who they are. You get on with your healing, the right people surrounding you, and have some compassion for the flying monkeys at the same time. So, if you're watching this so far, and recognizing flying monkey dynamics in your life, whether you've been targeted by them or you realize that you might have been one yourself, please know that understanding is the first step toward change, which is always the case, isn't it? You'll see that sentence again and again in all our videos. Understanding is always the first step. These patterns are incredibly common because they're rooted in survival mechanisms that we have kind of, we still retain from evolutionary processes, and family systems that kind of prioritize peace over truth. That is essentially what is happening. But you get to choose differently. You have a choice. If this video has kind of helped you understand something that you've been dealing with, then please hit that like button and let me know in the comment section. Have you dealt with flying monkeys in your life? What kind of helped you navigate those relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this topic. And as always, if you want more psychology content that kind of explains the complex dynamics we're all trying to figure out, then please make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, because we are going into all of these topics in great depth, and we will continue to do so going forward. Um, I also invite you to go to our blog, huddlepsychology.substack.com, where you will find that this video is supported by a much more long form blog piece with suggested, recommended, and suggested readings if you want to dive deeper into the subject matter yourself. And also, if you want to talk about any of these kinds of experiences on a one on one basis, you can reach out to me on my email, rahul@huddlepsychology.com, where you can introduce yourself with your concerns and issues, and I'll try and respond as quickly as I possibly can. So, until next time, you keep flourishing, and goodbye.